The Eligium space station felt like it had a heartbeat, a quiet thrum of circulating air blending with the soft hum of power conduits and the occasional clank of shifting bulkheads. For Alec Voss, however, it was just another metal labyrinth orbiting a distant star, a routine assignment in a place he'd rather skip. As he wandered through the dim corridors, tapping away at the weathered console on his forearm, he muttered to himself. Glitch after glitch, he grumbled, scrolling through the endless list of navigation errors. The station's automated systems had been spitting out warnings for days, yet no one could trace the cause. And as one of the few human engineers permitted such deep access, the task of solving the riddle fell to him. Alec was proficient, perhaps too proficient, judging by how frequently his superiors dispatched him to handle messes in isolated stations like Eligium. But patience with protocols? That wasn't his strong suit. Instead of waiting for official clearance codes from the station's overseers, he decided to take matters into his own hands. Bypassing the usual restrictions, he rigged his access. That should do it, he murmured with a sly grin, pressing the final command. The door in front of him slid open with a hiss, and Alec strode through, his eyes still glued to his ARM console. He was already 3 steps inside before he realized he had entered the wrong room. This was no maintenance corridor. The space around him felt like it belonged to a different world. Pale, bioluminescent strips wove through the ceiling, casting a gentle blue glow that gave the room an almost ethereal feel, as though moonlight filtered through deep ocean water. Delicate, silvery curtains hung from the high ceiling, creating an air of serenity and privacy. Alec froze, taking in the opulent surroundings, the elegant furniture, and the tall-backed chairs, unsure if he should retreat or remain still. Before he could decide, a figure caught his eye, a silhouette at the far end of the room. Seated before a large, concave screen filled with unfamiliar symbols, she sat poised and undisturbed. It wasn't the alien technology that stole his breath, but the alien herself. Her skin was a cool, muted blue, and each movement revealed faint, frost-like patterns along her shoulders and neck. Pink hair, interwoven with faint streaks of white, cascaded down her back in soft waves. She looked regal and unearthly, like someone had sculpted the night sky into a living form. "Who are you?" Her voice cut through the silence, calm yet commanding. She hadn't turned to look at him, but Alec could feel the weight of her attention, each word seeming to carry a silent warning. Alec had faced his share of malfunctions, a hostile alien or two, and even a rogue maintenance drone with a vendetta. Yet, standing there flustered, all he could manage was a stammered, hi. Instantly, he regretted it. She turned then, her eyes locking onto his. They were a dark, iridescent blue that shimmered with shifting colors, capturing the light in a mesmerizing display. She studied him, her gaze sweeping over his tousled hair and worn utility jumpsuit. He suddenly felt out of place, like a scruffy dog that had stumbled into a royal banquet hall. "This chamber is restricted," she said, her tone sharp now. "Identify yourself." His mind raced between honesty and an excuse that wouldn't get him vaporized. He lifted his hands in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture. "Alec Voss, engineer. I was just troubleshooting some navigation errors. And the door, he sighed, shoulders slumping. "I took a wrong turn. My mistake." She tilted her head, a flicker of something, a spark of interest, momentarily softened her gaze, though it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Are you always this reckless with security protocols, Mr. Voss?" she asked, with a hint of dry amusement slipping into her voice. Clearing his throat, Alec gave a weak grin. "I like to think of it as being proactive," he replied, although the joke felt thin under her piercing gaze. "You know, solving problems before they spiral." She stood then, and Alec realized just how tall she was, almost a head taller than him. Her movements were fluid and composed, like the gentle ripple of water. She spoke again, her voice smooth but edged with curiosity. "And what, precisely, were you hoping to solve by intruding upon the private chambers of Rina, Queen of the Valen Dominions?" Alec's blood ran cold. The Valen Queen. He'd heard rumors of the Valens, an isolated and proud race rarely seen outside their own realm. Their rulers were known to be both formidable and unapproachable. Yet here he was, face to face with their monarch in her personal chamber. His brain screamed at him to apologize and run. But instead, the words that tumbled out were, "Well, now that you mention it, I'm guessing your navigational glitches might be less of a concern than the assassin bots prowling around in your ventilation system." She narrowed her eyes, and for a brief moment, Alec thought he might have crossed into pure foolishness. But then, to his surprise, she raised a single eyebrow, and the faintest hint of a smile curved at the edge of her lips. "Assassin bots?" Alec nodded, trying to keep his voice steady despite his quickening heartbeat. "Yes, someone's been tampering with access panels, and there's been a series of unusual power surges. The programming's clumsy, though. It could use a bit more finesse." Rina regarded him intently, an unreadable expression in her gaze. For an instant, he thought he saw a flicker of surprise, perhaps even interest, but it disappeared as swiftly as it had come. "I see," she said, her tone measured. "So your proactive approach involves offering unsolicited advice to a foreign monarch." Alec scratched the back of his neck. "People say I have a knack for that," he admitted. To his surprise, she chuckled, a soft, almost musical sound that seemed to make the air around them lighter. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Alec Voss. Perhaps both." He was about to respond when the door behind him slid open, and two Valen guards stepped in, clad in sleek, dark armor. They halted upon seeing him, their expressions hidden beneath their helmets. "Your Highness," one of them said, a hint of urgency in his voice. "The council awaits. Shall we escort you?" Rina raised her hand, silencing him, her attention fixed back on Alec. Her gaze turned thoughtful, appraising him as if he were some curious enigma. "Tell me, Alec Voss," she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. "Why did you not call for assistance the moment you realized your error?" Alec considered lying, but something about her tone told him it wouldn't work. He met her gaze, forcing himself to stay steady. "I guess if I was going to die for wandering into the wrong room, I at least wanted to know why. Besides," he paused, taking a breath, "I wasn't entirely sure you'd actually kill me." A long silence followed, stretching the moment as the guards shifted uneasily, waiting for her response. But Rina merely smiled, a delicate expression that was both beautiful and unsettling in its subtlety. "An engineer who values honesty over self-preservation," she mused. How quintessentially human. Alec wasn't sure if he should feel complimented or insulted. "Is that a good thing?" he asked cautiously. She inclined her head, a regal gesture that seemed to convey several layers of meaning. "An observation," she replied. "You may leave, Alec Voss. But be warned, there are places within this station where a wrong door may lead to a fate beyond even your wit to evade." Alec exhaled in relief, nodding. "Understood, Your Highness." He made a quick but respectful exit toward the door, acutely aware of the guard's gaze on his back. Just as Alec Voss slipped out of the Valen Queen's private chambers, his pulse finally began to slow. He'd had his share of risky encounters, but this was something else entirely. Face to face with Queen Rina of the Valen Dominion, an alien monarch known for her calculated resolve and near-mythical presence among her people. Yet she'd let him leave, with nothing more than a warning. He exhaled, the tension dissipating slowly as he wound his way through Eligium's corridors back to the station's lower engineering decks. As he reached his workstation, his colleague Thera, a wiry and perceptive technician, looked up from a stack of consoles. "You're late," she noted, eyebrow raised as she caught sight of his disheveled appearance. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," Alec muttered, sliding onto the bench beside her and swiping his hand across his forehead. He glanced at her, considering whether to share what had just happened. Thera, sharp as she was, didn't miss a beat. "What is it, Alec?" she asked, leaning in, her tone unusually soft. "Did something go wrong with the navigational checks?" Actually, it wasn't the navigational system. Alec paused, watching Thera's face for any sign of recognition or suspicion. I may have wandered into Queen Rina's private chambers by mistake." Thera's eyes widened, and her usually steady hands faltered as she set down her tools. You're kidding, right? Alec, they vaporize people for less than that. I know, Alec said, swallowing. But she didn't. She let me go. The corners of Thera's mouth twitched. I'm not sure if that means she's merciful, or if she's got plans for you that you don't want to know about. Either way, it doesn't add up. Queen Rina is a mystery to her own people. Why would she let a human who broke into her private chambers walk away? Alec shrugged, the memory of the Queen's appraising gaze still lingering in his mind. Honestly, Thera, I think she was just curious. Almost like she was testing me. Thera raised an eyebrow. Curious? The Valen Queen, curious about a human engineer with a bad habit of wandering off. Alec nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. I guess so. They fell into silence, the hum of the station's machinery, the only sound in the dimly lit workspace. Alec's thoughts drifted back to Rina's last words. There are places within this station where a wrong door may lead to a fate beyond even your wit to evade. Her voice had held a strange edge, a hint of warning, maybe even caution. He wasn't entirely sure what to make of it, but he knew one thing. His presence on Eligium was now more complicated than he'd ever imagined. Just as he started to settle back into his work, an alert pinged from his forearm console. A priority message, flashing with a Valen seal. Alec exchanged a wary look with Thera. Better answer that, she murmured, her gaze darkening. Valen messages aren't exactly optional. With a hesitant tap, Alec opened the message. A message from the Queen herself, her words concise but firm. Engineer Alec Voss, your presence is required in the council chamber. Immediate attendance is expected. The council chamber was a sight Alec had only heard about. Tucked into the heart of Eligium, it was a grand, circular space that rivaled the scale of any human construction he'd ever seen. When he entered, his breath caught. Towering, stone-like columns adorned with faintly glowing alien symbols lined the room, and at its center sat Queen Rina on an imposing throne, flanked by Valen advisors in dark robes. Alec approached, his footsteps echoing on the polished stone floor. The silence weighed heavy, pressing down on him as he came to a halt before the Queen and her council. Rina's gaze met his, calm yet assessing, as though reading the depths of his thoughts. Engineer Voss, she began, her voice filling the chamber. You encountered me earlier in circumstances that, shall we say, were less than ideal. Alec nodded, holding his breath. Yes, Your Highness. I apologize for the intrusion. It was never my intention to breach your private space. Rina's expression softened slightly. Indeed. And yet, this unplanned encounter has raised questions. Both for you and for me. The room's tension sharpened. Alec resisted the urge to shift his weight as Rina's advisors murmured among themselves, their voices low and terse. Rina lifted a hand, silencing them. As you may know, our Dominion's alliance with the Interstellar Coalition is tentative, she continued, her gaze unwavering. Trust is yet to be fully forged between our worlds. Your unplanned intrusion should have, ended quite differently. She paused, a gleam of intrigue in her eyes. But there's something about you, Mr. Voss. Perhaps your proactivity, as you called it, holds a kind of potential. Alec forced himself to meet her gaze. Potential, Your Highness? Yes. We have interests aboard this station that require insight beyond our own, Rina said. Her tone was as enigmatic as the blue hues of her skin, shimmering subtly under the chamber lights. These assassin bots you mentioned, should they indeed exist, threaten more than just our station's operational security. If someone or something is compromising our systems, I need someone who can unravel the truth discreetly. Alec felt a spark of excitement, mixed with unease. You're asking me to investigate? Rina inclined her head. If you accept, you will report directly to me, and me alone. My advisors have their own methods, but I require someone with an outsider's perspective. Someone without the layers of protocol our own may be tempted to follow. Alec hesitated, aware of the weight of her words. In accepting, he'd be venturing into a political minefield, one where any mistake could spell his end. Yet, the chance to work directly with the Valen Queen, to uncover the secrets of this mysterious station, was more than he'd ever dreamed of. "I accept, Your Highness," he said, his voice steady. A slight smile curved at the edges of Rina's mouth. "Very well, Engineer Voss. Your first task is to observe. Seek out any anomalies, disturbances, anything that suggests a foreign presence interfering with our station systems." She glanced at her advisors, her gaze steely, before turning back to Alec. "You'll find that trust is a rare currency here, Mr. Voss. Earn it, and you may uncover more than you bargained for." With that, she dismissed him, her enigmatic smile lingering as he left the chamber. Alec's mind raced as he retraced his steps back toward the engineering decks. He'd just been handed a mission that was equal parts opportunity and risk. But one question lingered in his thoughts as he left. Who was meddling with Eligium systems, and what did they want with the Valen Queen station? Later, in his quarters, Alec began to sift through the station systems, combing through the data for any anomalies. Hours passed in silence until, at last, something caught his eye. A hidden relay, embedded deep within the air ducts, pinging with an irregular, encrypted signal. Alec's pulse quickened. He decoded the first few lines, his brow furrowing as he realized what he was seeing. Someone was siphoning data from the station's core, routing it to an unknown endpoint in deep space. Alec leaned back, a surge of questions churning in his mind. Just who or what was spying on Eligium? And more importantly, why? Alec's heart raced as he examined the data flickering across his console. The relay embedded deep in the air ducts wasn't just a glitch or a system error. It was a calculated breach, a data siphon designed to be nearly undetectable. Whoever had planted it was pulling classified information straight from Eligium's core, relaying it to an unknown location in deep space. "Just what did I sign up for?" he muttered, fingers flying over the console to capture the rogue signal's frequency. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a small breach. It was something far larger, something dangerous enough to bring him into Queen Rina's orbit. Alec locked the signal in, tracing it back to its source. The line trailed through a web of hidden relays, a delicate network concealed within the station's infrastructure. He quickly realized it would take more than just engineering skills to track the endpoint. He would need to navigate layers of the station's underbelly, and if he was discovered poking around without a direct order, even Queen Rina's protection might not be enough to save him. The following morning, Alec made his way to the station's maintenance hub, a sprawling labyrinth of machinery and conduits that spanned multiple decks. Most engineers avoided this area, preferring the cleaner, more manageable sectors, but here was where he would find the hardware behind the mysterious signal. He was deep into recalibrating one of the conduits when he sensed someone watching him. He looked up and found himself face-to-face with one of Rina's guards, a Valen warrior named Elner. The guard's tall, lean frame seemed to take up all the space around him, and his silver-toned eyes studied Alec with the cold precision of a weapon aimed at a target. "Alec Voss," Elner stated, his voice as smooth as polished metal. "You're working outside your assigned sector." Alec's heart skipped a beat. "I'm recalibrating some auxiliary power lines," he said, attempting to sound casual. "These conduits have been out of sync since yesterday. Thought I'd nip it in the bud." Elner's gaze remained steady, unwavering. "Then you will have no objection to a quick inspection of your console logs, correct?" The request was almost laughable. Elner wasn't there for maintenance, and they both knew it. But Alec nodded, his mind racing to cover his tracks. "Of course." He subtly swiped his forearm console, locking the encrypted relay logs behind a wall of innocuous engineering data, then handed it over. Elner studied the logs, scrolling with an unreadable expression. When he finally looked up, there was a trace of something Alec couldn't quite place in his eyes. Mistrust? Or curiosity? "You've been in this sector frequently," Elner noted, his voice carefully neutral. "Queen Rina has taken a keen interest in your work." Alec's stomach twisted, but he kept his face neutral. "I've been assigned to a lot of high-security tasks. Guess I caught her attention." The guard studied him for a moment longer before handing the console back. "Don't stray too far from your assigned duties, Mr. Voss," Elner said, his tone laced with an unspoken threat. "There are places on this station where uninvited guests are not welcome." With that, Elner turned and disappeared down the corridor, leaving Alec alone once more. He exhaled a sigh of relief, fingers trembling slightly as he resumed his search. Hours later, Alec finally found what he was looking for. Deep within the station's power grid, a relay junction held a tiny receiver, tucked into a crevice where no one would think to look. He ran a diagnostic scan and nearly gasped at the results. The receiver was actively transmitting, but the signal was encrypted in a Valan dialect he didn't recognize, a language that the Coalition barely had records of. He was so immersed in deciphering the code that he didn't hear the footsteps behind him until a soft voice cut through the silence. Searching for something specific, engineer? Alec froze, recognizing the voice. He turned slowly to see Queen Rina herself, her tall, imposing figure backlit by the faint glow of the power grid. Her deep blue skin seemed to shimmer in the dim light, and her pink hair cascaded over her shoulders like silk. Alec's throat went dry. "Your Highness," he stammered, quickly standing to face her. "I didn't expect." Rina tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "You have found something, haven't you?" She glanced past him at the hidden receiver, her gaze sharp as a blade. "What does it transmit?" Alec swallowed, unsure how much to reveal. It's pulling data from the station's core. Every transmission from this relay is being sent out to an unknown location, encrypted in a Valan code I've never seen. Rina's face betrayed nothing, but her eyes held an intensity that told him she knew more than she let on. She stepped closer, inspecting the relay, her gaze cool and focused. "This encryption is of ancient Valan origin," she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. "A language reserved only for the Council and the Dominion's inner circle." Alec's curiosity flared. Who would have the clearance to use something so restricted? "Only those closest to the Dominion's power structure," she replied, her voice chilling. "Or someone within the Coalition if they have assistance from a Valan insider." Alec hesitated, piecing together the implications. "So there's a spy on Eligium?" Rina nodded slowly. "This is what I feared." Her eyes met his, a trace of determination hardening her expression. "Someone is working to undermine the Valan Dominion, and they're hiding in the shadows of this station." Before Alec could respond, a sound echoed from deeper within the maintenance hub, a faint scraping, followed by a low, rhythmic tapping. Rina's gaze flicked toward the noise, and her expression darkened. "They're watching us," she murmured, gesturing for Alec to stay quiet. "Be on guard." Rina moved silently toward the source of the sound, her footsteps barely making a sound. Alec followed, heart pounding, every instinct on edge as they entered a cramped corridor filled with tangled pipes and flashing terminals. They rounded a corner just in time to see a figure duck into a side panel, vanishing down a narrow access ladder leading to the lower decks. "Whoever it is, they're headed to the cargo sector," Alec whispered, adrenaline surging through his veins. Rina's jaw tightened. "The cargo sector houses sensitive Dominion shipments. If there's anything compromising our systems, it will be there." They exchanged a glance, and without another word, they set off in pursuit. The cargo sector was vast, filled with towering crates and shadowed alcoves that seemed to stretch endlessly. Alec kept close to Rina, the faint hum of machinery filling the space as they moved deeper into the maze of crates. Just as they reached the center, Alec spotted a flicker of movement in the corner of his eye. "There," he whispered, pointing toward a shadowed figure moving swiftly among the crates. Rina didn't hesitate. She strode forward, her presence as commanding as ever, and raised her voice with unyielding authority. "You there? Stop!" The figure froze, half hidden in the shadows. For a brief moment, Alec caught a glint of something metallic in the figure's hand, the unmistakable shape of a weapon. He reached for his own sidearm, tensing as the figure turned, revealing a Coalition uniform beneath the shadows. The intruder's eyes flashed, and Alec recognized the face. It was Roan, a Coalition officer Alec had seen in passing, but knew little about. He'd always seemed reserved, but his gaze now was cold and calculating. Rina's voice was steely. "Lieutenant Roan, what are you doing here?" Roan hesitated, then smirked, his weapon still pointed toward her. "I could ask you the same, Your Highness, but I suspect we both know the answer." Alec's mind spun, pieces clicking into place. Roan was the mole, the one who'd been siphoning data from Eligium's core. But the real question was, who was he working for? Rina's gaze was unyielding as she took a step forward, her presence unwavering. Lower your weapon, Roan. You're outnumbered, and there's nowhere to run. Roan's smirk faded, his eyes narrowing as he took a step back. You're right, but I don't have to escape. I just need to send one final message. Before Alec could react, Roan tapped a device on his wrist. A low hum filled the air as a series of lights blinked on the crates around them. Alec's blood ran cold as he realized what was happening. Roan had activated explosives hidden among the cargo. Rina's eyes widened. Run! Together, she and Alec bolted, the sound of beeping escalating as they sprinted toward the nearest exit. Behind them, the cargo bay erupted in a deafening explosion, flames searing through the air as they dove into a maintenance tunnel, the force of the blast echoing behind them. As they caught their breath, Alec looked at Rina, the reality sinking in. Whoever was after them wasn't playing games. Your Highness, he panted, we're in a lot deeper than I thought. Rina's expression was unreadable, her gaze focused and fierce. Yes, Alec. And now, it's time to find out who's pulling the strings. Smoke hung in the air as Alec and Queen Rina made their way through the narrow, dimly lit maintenance tunnel. The sound of blaring alarms echoed down the metal corridors, and the vibrations of emergency bulkheads slamming shut resonated through the floor beneath their feet. Alec's mind was racing. Every nerve was on high alert. He stole a glance at Rina, who moved with a calm efficiency, her eyes sharp and calculating despite the chaos. We can't stay down here for long, she said, her voice a low murmur over the alarms. Roan's sabotage could be the tip of a much larger plot. Alec nodded, but the truth gnawed at him. If Roan was just a pawn, then who was pulling the strings? And why target the Dominion and the Coalition simultaneously? They emerged from the maintenance tunnel into a secluded alcove of the station. This sector was older, with walls coated in layers of faded paint, emergency lights casting eerie shadows. The hum of the main reactor reverberated faintly through the walls, a reminder of the power and danger embedded within the station. This is close to the secure communication hub, Rina said, her tone matter-of-fact. Roan's last transmission will be logged there. Alec rubbed the back of his neck. But if they know you're here, they'll have doubled the security. Rina's eyes narrowed. Then we'll have to get creative. They moved through the corridors, keeping to the shadows, until they reached the entrance to the communications hub. The security team on duty was standard Coalition. 2 guards flanking the door, rifles slung over their shoulders, helmets tilted as they exchanged casual conversation. Alec scanned his options quickly, but Rina was already moving. She straightened, her posture transforming from stealthy to regal in a heartbeat. Alec barely had time to realize her plan before she stepped confidently into the open corridor, her steps echoing against the metal floor. The guards looked up in shock, straightening instantly. Your Majesty, one of the guards stammered, fumbling his rifle into a salute. We weren't expecting you. Is there something? I require access to the communication logs, Rina said, her voice carrying authority but tempered with calm. Effective immediately. The guards exchanged nervous glances. We weren't informed of any high-clearance entries today. Rina met their gazes without a hint of hesitation. Then consider this your new order. Or, she added with a measured pause, would you prefer I bring this up with your commanding officer? The guard swallowed hard and lowered his gaze, reaching for his console. Of course, your Majesty. Right away. The door slid open, and Rina and Alec stepped into the hub. Inside, the communication terminal hummed softly, its screen alive with streams of data and flashing alerts. Alec quickly set to work, fingers flying over the console as he sifted through security logs and transmission histories. There it is, Alec whispered, eyes widening as a line of encrypted data appeared on the screen. Roan's transmission was piggybacked onto an outgoing diplomatic message, sent straight into Dominion territory. Dominion territory? Rina's brow furrowed. That can't be right. Why would Roan's handlers want to alert Dominion leadership? Alec nodded grimly. Unless they want to make it look like an attack from the Dominion, or worse, an internal Dominion conspiracy. Rina's jaw tightened as the weight of the implication sank in. They want to drive a wedge between the Dominion and the Coalition, spark mistrust, and possibly even conflict. Alec hesitated, but Roan worked with Coalition intelligence. It seems too risky. Why would he betray his own side? Rina regarded him thoughtfully, her gaze assessing. People have their reasons, she replied, a hint of bitterness in her voice. It's possible Roan believed he'd benefit from a fractured alliance. Or he could have been coerced. Alec turned back to the console. Let me see if I can trace the transmission further back. Maybe there's a pattern to his previous logs that will tell us more about his motivations. But before he could continue, a voice crackled through his earpiece, one he didn't recognize. Alec Voss and Queen Rina, you're both hereby ordered to surrender immediately. You are suspected of conspiracy and unauthorized access to classified communications. Security teams are on their way to detain you. Alec's stomach dropped. The voice was flat, unyielding, and Coalition. They've been discovered. Rina's expression didn't change, but Alec saw a flash of anger in her eyes. They're framing us as traitors, she said quietly. And it looks like they intend to make this the final chapter of our story. Without another word, Rina strode to a backup console, her fingers flying across the interface. Alec watched as she pulled up a blueprint of Eligium's infrastructure, pinpointing an alternate route. This way, she said, nodding to a narrow passage on the far side of the hub. It'll take us through the observation sector and bypass the main security checkpoints. They slipped through the passage, winding through narrow maintenance shafts and access corridors that Alec hadn't even known existed. He stole glances at Rina as they moved, her determination and focus unwavering. He'd never met anyone like her, a ruler who didn't just command respect but earned it, time and again, with every action. When they reached the observation sector, Alec paused, taking in the breathtaking view before them. They were on the outer ring of the station, a curved wall of glass stretching across the observation deck. Beyond the glass, distant stars glittered like icy diamonds, and the faint glow of a nebula cast an ethereal light across the room. We're still in Dominion space, Rina murmured, her gaze far away. But the boundaries are shifting. Forces are converging that neither the Coalition nor the Dominion can fully control. Alec's mind was spinning with questions, but one rose above the rest. Your Majesty, why are you risking so much to stay on this station? With all due respect, you could have ordered a full Dominion investigation, protected yourself. Rina's gaze turned cold, and Alec instantly regretted his words. Do you think I would abandon my people the moment I sensed danger, Alec? That I'd leave my duty because it's easier to command from afar? Alec swallowed, surprised by the fire in her voice. No, I just thought. Rina's gaze softened, and she let out a weary sigh. I remain because peace between the Dominion and the Coalition has always been fragile. The lives of millions are at stake, and if we falter now, everything we've worked for will be lost. Just then, Alec's console chimed softly with a notification. He glanced down, eyes widening as he recognized the encryption key. It was Roan's, but this time it was an incoming signal. Someone else was sending a message back. It's a signal from Dominion territory, Alec said, his fingers quickly decrypting the message. It's embedded with Roan's original encryption. Whoever planted that relay is reaching out again, but the content doesn't match anything like espionage. Rina frowned, stepping closer to look at the screen. Alec quickly translated the message, his voice tight with disbelief. This is Commander Yara from the Valen Dominion. Coalition allies are compromised. Immediate action required to prevent catastrophe. Rina stared at him, her expression both stunned and calculating. Yara is my chief strategist. If she's reaching out like this, it means we're looking at an imminent threat, a coordinated attack, or sabotage from within. Alec nodded, thoughts racing. Roan's handlers might be intending to frame the Dominion for an attack, something big enough to destabilize the station and throw suspicion on both sides. If they sabotage Eligium, neither the Coalition nor the Dominion will have reason to trust each other. Rina's gaze hardened. We can't let them succeed. They're counting on confusion, but if we can expose them before they strike. Just then, the soft patter of footsteps sounded from the corridor behind them, followed by muffled voices. Rina's expression turned deadly serious. There's no time. We'll have to split up. You take this console data to someone trustworthy in Coalition Command, someone outside the intelligence circles, someone they'd least expect. I'll intercept Commander Yara's incoming shuttle to confront her directly. If we're lucky, we'll reach the source before they can strike. Alec hesitated, feeling a surge of panic. But, Your Majesty. Rina placed a hand on his shoulder, her gaze steady. Alec, we each have a role to play in this. Trust in that. This isn't just for the Dominion or the Coalition. It's for everyone aboard this station. He nodded, steeling himself. Understood, Your Majesty. Without another word, she turned and disappeared down the corridor. Alec clenched his fists, taking one last look at the observation deck's view of the vast, indifferent stars beyond. He'd never asked to be a hero, never thought he'd be thrown into a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power. But Rina's courage had sparked something in him, a sense of responsibility that outweighed his fear. Gripping the console data tightly, he set off down the corridor, ready to fight for Eligium, for peace, and perhaps for a future that neither the Coalition nor the Dominion could yet envision.